asking her about the provisions in the agreement we could not see. They were secret. We were not privy to any of those. I have the same security clearance she does, being number 2 on the Intelligence Committee. She just flat refused to tell us what was in it. I remember listening to her. I asked her on cross-examination whether she herself had seen those provisions in the agreement. She said she had not. And I said, how can you agree to something that has provisions that you haven't even seen? And she had real difficulty with that, but I cross-examined her further and asked her if she was in the room with those documents. And she said, well, yes, she had. I said, well, tell me about that. And she said, well, I was there. And I said, well, did you have the documents in your hand? And she said, yes, I did. I said, did you read those agreements? She said, no, she didn't. She just she was sitting in the row and they passed it through and it went down. I had real trouble with the credibility on that. And I have trouble getting past that at this point. I had hoped through this confirmation process that she would overcome the impression that I had had in the previous dealings with her on the Iran deal. Unfortunately, as I pressed her on this Iran thing that we're headed to right now, I think we're going to see the same movie that we've seen before, and I have real reservations about that. At the end of the day, I just don't think she's the best or the right person for this, and I'm going to vote against her for that reason. Having said that, I understand that she will be confirmed in all likelihood and look forward to trying to get a different direction in the future. Asked for Mr. McEwen's nomination to be Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources. I plan to support his nomination and look forward to working with Mr. McEwen as he tackles the many management issues currently facing the department. In particular, I hope he will focus on the need to enhance global health security and diplomacy, as well as the need to ensure that our diplomats are capable, resourced, and ready for any complex operating environment. I also hope he will take a strong role in helping the department make decisions and improve the budget process so his committee can better understand how the department allocates resources. With that, I yield back. Thank you, Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cardin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to want to respond to Senator Rish's 2 points in regards to Wendy Sherman, and I very much appreciate his observations about Ambassador Sherman's extraordinary background, her expertise in this area, her record of public service. We come to a different conclusion. I think she is the right person at this time. First, in regards to working with Congress, let me take you back to the beginning of the discussions of the nuclear agreement with Iran. And there was a sharp difference between the Republicans in Congress and the Obama administration as to how that agreement would be handled with Congress. Senator Corker, who was the chairman of the committee, at the time I was the ranking Democrat, we worked with the Obama administration to develop a process that required them to come to Congress to make certain certifications, to give us the information we needed. And Ambassador Sherman was part of that process that allowed us to develop a process. It wasn't perfect, but it ended up getting unanimous support, 98-1 support in the United States Senate. And then it was implemented in a way that we had regular briefings of classified information given to Democrats and Republicans so that we could make our own independent judgments. We had full access, and Ambassador Sherman was part of that process. And I think Senator Corker would agree that each member of this committee, each member of the Senate, got the information we needed to make our own independent judgments. At the end of the day, I disagreed with the Obama administration, but I certainly had the information I needed, and Ambassador Sherman was part of that process that made sure that we had the information we needed to make that decision. It was unprecedented, the amount of information made available to us. Now, in regards to the documents that the IAEA had that Ambassador Sherman had the chance to look at or didn't look at during the process, remember, our participation in the IAEA requires us to keep that information confidential. We're not permitted to share that information, those of us who are involved in the IAEA process. She had no choice but to honor her commitments to the IAEA. So I just urge my colleagues to recognize we have a unique opportunity in Ambassador Sherman to get someone who really appreciates and understands the relationship between the executive and legislative branch. She's a product of the United States Senate, having served as Chief of Staff, Senator Mikulski. So I just urge my colleagues, this is a person, to me, who is eminently qualified for this position, and I urge my colleagues to support her nomination.
Does anyone else seek recognition? Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure what Senator Cardin's talking about, 98-1 vote. Maybe I was the only one that voted no.
No, you were not.
My point being is what we found out is that what the JCPOA should have been is a treaty, which is what my amendment was. It was defeated, but we're seeing the folly of doing these agreements as executive agreements without full information, without full disclosure, and without the ratification of the Senate. And so now we're ping-ponging back and forth. But I just need to make that comment.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Can I respond to this?
Yes, Senator.
First of all, I appreciate Senator Cardin's passion on this, and I would hope that as we go forward, we start with what Ms. Sherman said publicly and privately to us, and that is this isn't 2015, and we're in a different position today. So I hope we can set aside feelings we have about personalities and move forward. I have to tell you, I have the feeling I've got, and I hope I'm dead wrong on this, is we're rewinding the movie and going to show the movie again, and that's not going to work. We know that won't work, and I truly want to work with my Democrat friends, with the administration, and try to come to some place on an Iran agreement that we can all get behind, because and I think every one of us have strong feelings about this, and as we go forward, I'm hoping we can meld this together to get to a better place than we got last time, and I appreciate the remarks.
Thank you. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to echo the remarks from both you and Senator Cardin about...
Welcome to both of the nominees. Ms. Clark, as I look to your record, I see the record of someone who has spent a career as a partisan advocate. Last year, you wrote an op-ed in Newsweek entitled, "I Prosecuted Police Killings, Defund the Police, but Be Strategic." Do you still believe it is a good idea to defund the police?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I do not support defunding the police. The impetus for writing that op-ed was to make clear that I do not support defunding the police, and I spend considerable time talking about the need to channel resources to places such as mental health treatment to alleviate some of the burdens that we place on the doorstep of law enforcement, some of the issues we ask them to wrestle with that are outside their core competency. But
Ms. Clark, let me, and we have limited time, so let me, you say you don't support defunding the police. You just said it twice. The title of your article was Defund the Police, but let's not just look to the title. Your article begins by saying that the national protests we saw last year, quote, opened up space for transformative policy discussions. You then continue to write, into that space, and this is a quote, into that space has surged a unifying call from the Black Lives Matter movement, defund the police. Do you really believe defund the police is a unifying call?
I don't support defund the police.
I'm reading from your article. Do you disagree with your article?
Amidst the demonstrations and protests, I wanted to provide a different perspective. I don't support taking away resources from police and putting communities in harm's way. There's a rise in hate crimes and extremism.
Ms. Clark, you know you're testifying under oath here.
Please allow her to.
You just said
Senator
a moment ago.
Senator Cruz, please allow her to complete her answers.
Well, I'm not going to allow her to filibuster, so I'm going to ask a question. If she wants to answer the question that I asked, she can do so, but I'm not
She should be allowed. I hope you'll show respect to the witness and
I
allow her
will
to.
show respect to every witness, but we also have limited time, as you're aware, and you've been on this committee long enough to know that witnesses in avoiding questions, we'll try to filibuster on different topics. So I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to expect answers to the questions I ask. And I understand the chairman wants to jump in and defend the witnesses, but that's your prerogative to try to do so.
I will defend witnesses on either side and members on either side. We will be respectful in this committee. I hope that all members will.
I hope and expect the same standard will be applied to senators on both sides. Now, let's return to, you just said you don't support cutting funds from police. I find that astonishing and, Ms. Clark, frankly, not credible, because I'm holding the article you wrote, and I actually pulled out a highlighter and highlighted the beginning of each paragraph going through. And about midway through, you have a paragraph that says, we must invest less in police and more in social workers. The next paragraph is, we must invest less in police and more in social support to our schools. The next paragraph begins, we must invest less in police and more in mental health aid. 3 paragraphs in your article, you begin with the words, we must invest less in police, and you just told this committee under oath you don't support investing less in police. How do you square those?
If I may, Senator, I support the fact that President Biden is committing $300 million new dollars for the COPS program, $300 million new dollars for resources to the police. I wrote that op-ed without having the power of the purse string behind me, and talked about how we can allocate a limited pool of resources in a more effective way.
So do you believe you were wrong last year when you called for defunding the police and investing less in the police?
It's a poor title chosen by the editor.
It's not just the title, it's your text. We must invest less in police. 3 paragraphs you begin with those words. You wrote those words. Do you agree with those words today?
Without the power of the purse string, I wrote those words. But President Biden is committing more resources to police, and I think that's a great thing, Senator.
All right, let's shift to another topic. Your advocacy and, frankly, extreme position on defunding the police is paired with a history of not only excusing, but celebrating murderers who have murdered police officers. It's been reported that during law school, you helped organize a conference with speakers who referred to convicted cop killers as political prisoners. This included Mumia Abu-Jamal, who murdered a Philadelphia police officer, and Asanta Shakur, who was convicted of murdering a New Jersey state trooper, escaped from prison, and is on the FBI's most wanted list. Did you organize the conference? And do you support celebrating those who murder police officers as heroes and political prisoners?
That conference you're referring to was organized by the late Dr. Manning Marable, a noted historian who led the Institute for Research in African American Studies. I was a student providing support for the Institute, working on a range of projects. To the second question, Senator, no, I do not celebrate the loss of life.
So if you say you didn't organize the conference, why did multiple speakers at the conference thank you by name for inviting them to speak at the conference?
Because I was a hardworking student that made sure people were fed, mailed out invitations, provided the agenda. I was a student providing logistical support to a notable historian who was the one who organized that conference.
So if there's a police officer in Philadelphia or New Jersey today watching this hearing, how are they supposed to react to your nomination to one of the senior positions of the Department of Justice, knowing that as a student you participated in a conference celebrating and lionizing cop killers who murdered a Philadelphia police officer and a New Jersey state trooper? How should a cop today watching this react to that news?
I have never and would not ever celebrate the loss of life or the killing of a police officer, Senator. Not ever.
Do you believe they're political prisoners?
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Padilla.
They're going to raise taxes on hardworking Americans makes absolutely no sense. And the idea they're going to spend $6 trillion also makes absolutely no sense. So as I said, it seems to me they are doing everything wrong, making your job that much harder. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
It's a good thing to With
I don't give comments when you make your statements. Tell me what I said wrong in that
It's a good
statement.
thing that you're yielding back so I can give 5 minutes to Mr. Foster.
It's a good thing I made those points about how bad the Democrat policies are. That's the good thing. And we'd like to answer, it'd be nice if the Fed chairman would answer the fact that if you guys extend unemployment, which he said if it goes away will be good for the economy, and if you extend it, he wouldn't answer that question.
With that, I yield 5 minutes to Mr. Foster.
Thank you, and I sympathize with the chairman sort of being left speechless.
A series of opinions from the Supreme Court in 1901 that addressed the application of the Constitution to territories where the United States exercised sovereignty. Specifically, you describe these cases as, quote, a doctrine of pure judicial invention with absolutely no basis in the Constitution and one that is contrary to all judicial precedent and territorial practice. Later, in 2011, you concluded a Spanish-language academic article on the insular cases by saying, quote, it is now the hour, and indeed it has already grown late, for the Supreme Court to re-examine and remedy this offensive and obsolete judicial dilemma, which we have had to tolerate for more than 100 years by over 5 million American citizens who live in Puerto Rico and other territories of the United States. I take it then, based on your writings, that you believe the insular cases were wrongly decided.
Senator, yes, when I wrote in those academic books about the insular cases, I've discussed it from an academic perspective, and I've made reference to the fact, particularly, that the insular cases were decided by the same Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court, and that they considered racial, ethnic, discriminatory matters, and the same Supreme Court took that into account. Those are matters that nowadays I don't believe any member of any branch of Congress, of the government, I mean, would take those matters into consideration. So that is my criticism of the insular cases. In cases that I've had before me, I apply the doctrine as it still stands. That is the law of the United States, whether I like it or not.
So you've said you believe the insular cases were wrongly decided. Do you believe Brown versus Board of Education was rightly decided?
Senator, I believe it was rightfully decided, yes.
Okay, what about District of Columbia versus Heller?
Senator, that is a case that is the law of the land. I have to apply Heller, I have to apply McDonald, and it is the Supreme Court doctrine, which I will apply.
Well, I understand that, but that was not the question I asked you. You just told us you believe the insular cases were wrongly decided. You just told us that you believe...
Not the insular cases. Oh, yes, excuse me, yes, sorry.
That you believe the insular cases are wrongly decided. You just told us that you believe Brown versus Board of Education was rightly decided. So I'm asking you what your views are on Heller versus District of Columbia. Was it rightly decided or wrongly decided?
Well, Senator, as I mentioned, that is the law of the land, and I am aware that there are other challenges that will be upcoming, and there's one in California. That similar challenge could be before my court or the Court of Appeals. So that is something that, as a sitting judge, and that is a controversy that is live and ongoing, so I should not decide that. But I will apply Heller and McDonald. I can guarantee you that. Well, you were a sitting judge when you wrote about the insular cases, correct? Senator, yes, I have criticized historically the underpinnings of the insular cases, but... Well, not just the underpinnings. You said flat out they were wrongly decided and the Supreme Court should reverse them. That was not just an academic observation. That was calling a decision wrongly decided and saying it should be reversed. Correct. A decision based on racist underpinnings. I agree with you. And Brown versus Board of Education, certainly questions about race and litigation about what equal protection under the laws means. That litigation continues in courts across the country today. Is that right? Not the Brown holding. But the principles on which Brown was decided, those are actively litigated. There are particular equal protection cases filed in federal courts every day. That's the purpose of federal courts. So how about the Citizens United case? Was that wrongly decided? Senator, that is the binding precedent, and that is something that I could have a similar case in the future. But again, that is the law of the land. I have to apply it. So it seems on cases where I'm not clear what your standard is for when you will answer what questions were wrongly decided, what cases were wrongly decided, and what cases were not. Well, Senator, I can tell you, historically speaking, Brown, I can say, was correctly decided. The Insular cases, historically speaking, the rationale behind those cases was based on racist underpinnings. I have to say that rationale was incorrectly decided. As a matter of history.
Senator Hirono just offered a defense of you, saying that you refuse to commit to originalism because originalism would prevent outcomes that she supports. It would prevent outcomes in cases like Obergefell and Roe versus Wade, and because she supports those outcomes, she doesn't want judges who will follow the original understanding of the Constitution. Is that how you would articulate? Well, is it right that you don't intend to follow the original understanding of the Constitution?
The senator's time has expired. Judge, you may answer the question.
Senator, as I mentioned to an earlier question, I will apply originalism, and that is one of the factors or the tests that the Supreme Court has laid out for judges to follow, and I cannot ignore it. I have to follow originalism in the cases where it is appropriate.
But do you agree with Senator Hirono's
Senator's time has expired.
That those are the reasons?
The senator's time has expired. Senator Padilla is recognized for 5 minutes.
You know, this is a committee where we've had a little bit of comedy, and I recognize Senator Ossoff is new, but we generally don't have the chairman trying to jump in 30 seconds in.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
and I recognize the chairman may not want these questions answered.
The floor is mine. Point of personal privilege, Mr. Chairman.
There'll be order in the Judiciary Committee. Senator Cruz, your comment is noted, and Senator Padilla.
Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you,
Chairman Ossoff desperately does not want these questions answered.
Point of personal privilege.
Senator Hirono.
Who's next on this side? Mr. Raskin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Representative Clyde, you're opposing the legislative appropriation?
I'm opposing the legislative appropriation.
What are you here for an amendment? Or
yes, an amendment. I'm here for amendment number 48 to H.R. 4505.
Okay. Did you support the American Rescue Act?
I don't know that has anything to do with.
Well, it's just my question. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
Well, let's just stick to the amendment.
Okay. Well, I guess my question for you, Mr. Clyde, is: did you have an opportunity to see Officers Hodges and Fanone and Dunn testify today, or Sergeant Gunnell?
Mr. Raskin, let's stick to the amendment as the.
Well, I'm getting to the amendment. If you don't like the question, just say you can take the fifth, or you choose not to.
That's not the point.
Well, I don't need you correcting my question, sir. I'm asking, did you watch the testimony of the Capitol officers who defended our lives on January 6th, or did you not? It's a yes or no question.
It's irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant to this amendment right here, and I'd like to stick to it if you want to.
Then reclaiming my time, sir. Reclaiming my time.
Is that what you want to do, Mr. Chairman?
Excuse me, Mr. Clyde. I have the floor, not you.
Excuse me, everybody. First of all, the way this works, as you heard, either side can ask whatever they want to ask. Okay. You don't have to answer the question if you don't want to. I would urge everybody to kind of lower the decibel here. We're going down a road that we should. I wish we weren't, but we are.
I agree.
So you know,
Mr. Chairman, our colleagues have taken us down the road of quotations, and we have somebody who's got a quote right in the room. So I thought I would check it with him. He refuses to say whether or not he heard the Capitol officers who risked their lives and have experienced traumatic medical injuries. He refuses to say whether or not he watched them today. That's fine. That's his prerogative, and under the First Amendment or the Fifth Amendment, whatever it is, he doesn't have to testify about it. But I want to ask you this. They were asked the question by several of our colleagues, including Ms. Cheney, about statements that you made saying that the January 6th violent insurrection against Congress was akin to a normal tourist visit. And those officers said they weren't tourists, they were terrorists. Do you stand by your statement that they were tourists?
I would like you to quote my exact statement, not your interpretation of my statement.
Okay. Watching the TV footage of those who entered the Capitol and walked through Statuary Hall showed people in an orderly fashion staying between the stanchions and ropes, taking videos and pictures. You know, if you didn't know the TV footage was a video from January 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit. Those are your words.
And I stand by that exact statement as I said it.
Okay. Do you agree or disagree with the officers who spent 4 or 5 hours battling that medieval mob that had baseball bats and lead pipes and so on? Do you stand by the statement that the people that they were fighting were tourists, or would you agree with them that they were terrorists?
That statement did not say that those people were tourists. Okay, read the statement.
Okay,
and
well, I'm asking you now. Well, you've got the opportunity to tell America right now, Mr. Clyde.
Could we just lower our voices here? We don't. I'm sorry. I just.
Yeah, but you've got the opportunity to clarify for the whole country right now. For these officers, I urge you to watch it on TV. I urge you to watch it in your office. Officer Hodges, Officer Fanone, who experienced traumatic brain injury, who had a heart attack after he was tased by some of the tourists or terrorists. Officer Dunn, Officer Hodges. Do you think that what they experienced was an attack by tourists or terrorists or violent insurrectionists? You've got the opportunity to clarify for the whole country right now.
If you will read the first part of my statement.
I'm not interested in that. I'm asking you.
You're not interested in my statement, are you?
Mr. Chair,
you are not.
Can you yield to me for
I have read your statement once. The whole country and lots of people online believed your statement that it was a normal tourist visit.
That is not my statement.
Okay, well,
as you said, as you quoted, and then you just misquoted.
Clarify it right now for America.
I just clarified it.
Okay, I'm asking you. The people who attacked Officer Hodges.
You're not listening to my statement.
Mr. Chair, are there no rules?
Reclaim my time. Excuse me.
I'm trying to get a.
Who has the floor, Mr. Chairman?
It's Mr. Raskin's time, but the stenographer cannot keep track of people talking over one another. So. I would like everybody to kind of lower. Yeah, those who need to leave can leave. But I do think that I just
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Raskin's time, and
thank you.
Let's not talk over each other.
Again,
Mr. Chair,
I spent several hours today with millions of Americans watching sworn police officers testify about their battle to defend our lives, the members of the House and the senators. And they took issue, not with, let's put your statement aside because you used to think that you've been misinterpreted by people, but they're taking issue with an internet meme that the people here were just tourists. It was a normal day. And they were saying they weren't tourists, they were terrorists. How do you react to that?
Well, I'm not responsible for an internet meme. Okay. We are here to discuss this amendment, Mr. Raskin.
Okay. So you don't want to answer the question. I appreciate that. I wouldn't want to answer it if I said what you
We are here to discuss this amendment, and you are obviously not interested in that. You want to make this another January 6th hearing. This is not. This is the Rules Committee.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Clyde. You voted no on giving congressional gold medals to the officers who defended our lives on that day, 140 of whom were wounded, injured, dozens of them in the hospital. People lost fingers, people had their eyes gouged, people experienced traumatic brain injuries, people are experiencing post-traumatic stress syndrome to this day. And you voted no on extending congressional gold medals to them. Why did you do that?
Again, that has nothing to do with this amendment. But you know what I will tell you?
Oh, I'll bring it back to the amendment, Mr. Clyde.
That I co-sponsored an amendment, a bill to give a gold medal, 3 gold medals, to the Capitol Police, all right, for all of what they've done. It was introduced by Representative Gohmert. So I'm sorry if you didn't understand that or if you didn't maybe get that information.
Okay. I'll reclaim my time.
I am not going to vote to give
Mr. Clyde,
Speaker Pelosi
you were one of 21 members.
She is the one who is in charge of the Capitol Police and the Sergeant-at-Arms.
I'm sorry, Mr. Clyde. I'll reclaim my time. You were one of 21 members out of 435 who voted no. You voted not to award 4 congressional gold medals to the U.S. Capitol Police and those who protected the United States Capitol on January 6th. I'm just giving you the opportunity to tell us why you were one of the 21 members who voted against it.
I just told you, and you obviously didn't listen.
No, you told me about another bill that you said you sponsored that I never heard of, but why did you vote no on this bill, which was on the floor of the House?
The particular bill on the floor of the House, all right, was not appropriate. It was not that. The bill that was appropriate is the one that I co-sponsored.
Really, what made this inappropriate?
Because it awarded those gold medals to those Capitol Police for all of the times that they have defended this Capitol. Back in the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, not just one incident, because I think they deserve, because there were Capitol Police officers that died from gunshot wounds back earlier. Did you know that?
So you're saying this didn't go far enough? Is that your point? So you wanted to give the gold medal to these people, but you voted against it because you wanted to give it to them?
No.
Yeah, so
Okay,
yeah.
well, with that, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to say forgive me, colleagues, but I spent 4 hours today with the police officers who defended our lives on January 6th, and the level of rhetoric in this room about defunding the police and standing by the police does not stand up to what we heard this morning. And I don't accept it, and I find the rhetoric dangerous, describing anything that took place that day as analogous to tourism. And I would urge my colleague to please go back and listen to those Capitol officers and how they reacted to the idea that there was anything remotely analogous to a tourist visit in what they suffered on that day. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And again, if we can, I think the only people that there are questions for are Mr. Grothman. Are there any more for Mr. Clyde? One for Mr. Clyde. Any more for Ms. Plaskett? Ms. Jackson-Lee? Mr. Keller? Mr. Stauber? Yeah, Mr. Stauber, you have to remain. Mr. Keller, Mr. Plaskett, Ms. Jackson-Lee, you can leave if you'd like. But let's see if we can keep this abbreviated, and we need to wrap this up. Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To switch topics slightly, as co-chair of the Bipartisan Access to Legal Aid Caucus.
Mr. Jordan, when you appeared before the Rules Committee earlier this year in January, I asked you to say 5 simple words. The election was not stolen. And you were unwilling to say them then. Can you say those 5 words?
I've never said it was stolen, Mr. Chairman. I'll give you the same answer. Never said it was. I said we should investigate it. I said on January 6th, when the electoral votes were counted, that Joe Biden is president of the United States. And if you got a problem with that, I don't understand it. The real question is why don't you guys want to investigate what happened?
You said a lot of words just now, but unfortunately, you're still unwilling to say those 5 simple words. And I think that's incredibly important. Pushing debunk conspiracy theories and
I'm not pushing any conspiracy
fuel
theories.
to the fire when it comes to
Your obsession with 5 words seems pretty ridiculous to me.
Yeah, and when this works better. I mean, I'll let you speak, and then you can let me speak, and that's the way we work it here. But we saw on January 6th how misinformation could lead some people to violence and ultimately endanger our democracy. Mr. Jordan, on July 27th, you were asked by Brett Baer on Fox News if you talked to the former president on January 6th, and you didn't give a clear answer. You said, and I quote, "I've talked to the president so many, I can't remember all the days I've talked to him, but I've certainly talked to the president," end quote. The next day, on July 28th, you confirmed to Spectrum News that you spoke with the former president on January 6th. When asked by a Spectrum News reporter, Taylor Popolars, whether you spoke to the president before, during, or after the Capitol was attacked, you said, and I quote, "I spoke with him that day, after, I think after. I don't know if I spoke with him in the morning or not. I just don't know. I have to get back to you. I don't know when those conversations happened," end quote. So my question is, you've had 84 days since that interview to go back and check the records. So when did you speak with the former president on January 6th? Did you talk to the former president before, during, or after the attack on the Capitol?
Of course I've talked to the president.
All 3?
Of course I've talked to the president. I've been clear about that. I talk to him all the time. This is not about me, Mr. Chairman. I know you want to make it about me. You want to make it about individuals, other individuals. But this is about the lack of a proper security presence that day. That's what this committee, if this committee is going to do something that's worthwhile, that's what they should be investigating. Of course I talked to the president. I talked to him that day. I've been clear about that. I don't recall the number of times. But it's not about me. I know you want to make it about that, but this is about the, why wasn't, how about this? Why wasn't the National Guard here that day, Mr. Chairman?
If I can reclaim my time, I just want to...
Have you asked that question? Have you asked the Speaker, why wasn't the National Guard here?
No, my question to you, I'm asking the question to you.
And I gave you the answer.
Did you talk to the president, former president, before, during, or after the attack on the Capitol, or was it all three? The reason why I ask is, you know, you had 84 days since you said you couldn't remember, and you would check. So if you could just clarify the record, was it before, during, or after the attack on the
I talked to the president after the attack.
So not before or during?
Right.
Okay, and you...
And I've been clear about that.
Well,
but here, let me ask you a question. You brought up January 6th.
All right. But yeah, but my understanding is that you said to a reporter from Politico that you spoke to him during. So is now after the attack, or you?
During. No, I did not speak to the president during the attack.
So you admitted to speaking to the former president on January 6th, the same day you voted to overturn the election. You know, facts be damned. And although you've routinely suggested that you're just another member of Congress, speaking with the president, your name comes up again and again in regards to efforts to overturn the election. There is even reporting that back on December 27th, then President Trump spoke with then acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and others to discuss how to reverse Biden's win. An official who was on that call, Richard Donahue, notes you, Mr. Jordan, as a lawmaker who was referenced. This is the same meeting where President Trump told the Justice Department, according to handwritten notes by Mr. Donahue, and I quote, "Just say that the election was corrupt and, quote, leave the rest to me and our congressman." Did you discuss with President Trump a coordinated effort to overturn the results of the election?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no idea what that is. Of course not. But you brought up January 6th, Mr. Chairman?
What?
You brought up January 6th, and you said we tried to overturn the results of the election by simply objecting?
No, I just know he said by objecting.
Here's what I know.
Let me say, I don't know.
Okay, well, I hope I get a chance to respond at some point.
I just don't know of another member of Congress who is as deeply enmeshed in all of this as you are, and apparently you're unwilling to give some of the more specific answers to this committee today. I guess, are you willing to tell the Select Committee what you know about events leading up to, during,
I've been clear all along. I've got nothing to hide. I've been straightforward all along.
And just so you know, I mean, I'm looking here. This is a Politico story here. The quote here says, "Look, I definitely spoke to the president that day. I don't recall. I know it was more than once. I just don't recall the times." This is to Olivia Beavers. And you later said that I'm sure that one of the Trump-involved calls took place in the safe room because we were in that room forever. I mean, that's what you...
Yeah, after the thing, that's what I said. But what does this have to do with, what does this have to do with Steve Bannon? What does this have to do with Steve Bannon's contempt?
I'm just,
I thought that's why we were here.
Yeah, well, in your opening, you didn't mention Steve Bannon. Mr. Gates did.
No, I mentioned, yes, I did mention Bannon's name. I mentioned him very first.
You talked about inflation.
No, I did. No, I didn't. I said there are 4 batches of subpoena. The first batch, Bannon, Meadows, Patel, Scavino, first name I mentioned.
Yeah.
You got to go back. I'm sure the reporter can bring up the record.
Yeah, I think what I come away listening to your opening statement is that you're more outraged by people asking questions.
Not at all.
Than police being beaten.
I'm more outraged by the attack on people's First Amendment liberties.
Beaten here on January 6th, and the lives of the people who work for all of us being at risk.
You're a lawyer too, right? Nope. Okay, I thought you'd gone to law school.
I went to law school, never took the bar exam.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, gotcha. My dad never took the bar either. So, do you oppose the use of criminal contempt charges against people who refuse to testify before Congress?
No, we've used it. I mean, we contempt Lois Lerner after a year of hearings and investigations.
You sure did, didn't you? You said
Lois
the U.S.
Lerner.
attorney had a legal duty to go to the grand jury, didn't you?
Well, it says shall. When the Congress voted for contempt, it says shall go to the grand jury. That U.S. attorney didn't.
That's right. And
He
you
didn't
also
go.
said the U.S. attorney unilaterally decided to ignore the will of the House of Representatives.
It's true.
You said Mr. Manchin was legally bound to convene a grand jury, but indeed he ignored his obligation and unilaterally decided to ignore the will of the House of Representatives. Don't you think it's important that when we're exercising our Article I powers to get the evidence we need in order to legislate, that people obey the subpoenas of the United States House of Representatives? You used to believe that, Mr. Jordan. Do you no longer believe that?
Once a legitimate investigation, sure.
All right.
Sure.
In 2012, the Oversight Committee approved a resolution holding Attorney General Holder in contempt of Congress. Do you remember that one?
Say it again. I was thinking how I was going to elaborate on the answer when you cut me off to ask me the question again, please.
Well, continue, Mr. Jordan, because everybody's always violating your rights, so I'm going to give you all the time you want.
No one's violating my rights.
Okay. Well, look, let me remind you what you said when Attorney General Holder was held in criminal contempt of Congress. We simply want the facts, because Attorney General Eric Holder will not provide what the law requires. We are left with no other option except to hold him in contempt. We're doing the exact same thing, Mr. Jordan, with all the bluster about the border and all the other nonsense you're talking about, Russia and everything. We are holding him in contempt for violating a subpoena of the United States House of Representatives.
There wasn't some special select committee that Republicans were not permitted to serve on that issued those subpoenas. That's not the case.
All right, well, let's close with this. Mr. Jordan, why did you vote against the commission of 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats equals subpoena power? Why did you oppose that? Are you also not interested in what happened to us on January 6th?
Of course, everyone is interested in holding people accountable who did wrong. The FBI is doing that. The Justice Department is doing that appropriately. So what I'm not interested in.
Why did you have all those Benghazi investigations if you don't think Congress should be investigating?
Because Hillary Clinton misled the American people.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
If you want to...
A disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence. Now, you spent a long time as a judge when you have 3 things listed. Am I correct that anyone interpreting that, reading it, would conclude that harassment and intimidation are something different than threats of violence, given that you listed each of the 3 out separately? Is that consistent with the canons of construction?
The memorandum is addressed to professional prosecutors.
I asked you a question, not who it was addressed to.
Senator, at least let him respond.
No, not when he answers a non sequitur. If he
may
wants to
respond.
answer okay, you're taking my time now. This is not coming out of my time.
Listen,
when I ask a question,
we've given you more time than any other senator.
Mr. Chairman,
now listen,
when I ask
all I'm asking is allow him to respond.
Mr. Chairman, when I ask a question, he can answer the question, but he's proceeding to ask a total non sequitur. I asked about the canons of construction on the board.
Please let him respond.
I'll ask the question again. The opening line of the memo specifies harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence. Is it correct under the ordinary canons of construction that a legal reader would understand that harassment and intimidation means something different from threats of violence? Is that correct?
A legal reader would know.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make 3 points on this. First of all, in my judgment, the ranking member has bent over backwards to express comedy and to work with the chairman of this committee. I would note the committee has responded to those efforts of goodwill by doing things such as scheduling 2 successive business meetings in a single week when a matter is held over to circumvent the ability of the minority to focus on an issue of concern. That's not an expression of comedy when you have a business meeting on Wednesday and immediately do another business meeting on Thursday with the obvious intention of saying, never mind the prerogatives of the member who's exercising it, we're the majority, damn it, we're going to force it through. That's not an expression of comedy. Secondly, I would point out, with regard to the QFRs, there have been some nominees who have submitted their answers and submitted their answers reasonably. There have also been nominees who have openly defied this committee, and in fact, one of those nominees is before this committee today, Barbara Leaf. As the chairman knows, I spoke about Ms. Leaf at length on the floor yesterday. And Ms. Leaf's questions in response, her answers rather in response to questions I submitted for the record, completely defied the authority of this committee. Three questions in particular that she refused to provide even the barest modicum of answers. Number one, the administration is right now today holding hostage $130 million in military assistance to our ally, the nation of Egypt. And the administration is, among other things, demanding that Egypt release 16 prisoners that are currently incarcerated in Egypt. But the Biden administration refuses to identify who those prisoners are, refuses to tell this committee, refuses to tell the American people. I asked Ms. Leaf, who are the 16 prisoners that the administration is demanding a quid pro quo? There is some irony to how we spent last year in impeachment proceedings, given that the administration is explicitly and unabashedly insisting on a quid pro quo. You will get your $130 million that Congress has appropriated when you release these 16 individuals from jail. That is undoubtedly a quid pro quo. And the question I asked Ms. Leaf is, name the 16. Are they affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood? Do they have terrorist ties? Are they American citizens? Have they committed crimes of violence? Those are reasonable questions the American people would like to know. Ms. Leaf responded to those QFRs with 1,000 words of gobbledygook, where she spoke about everything under the sun except the specific question asked, who are the 16? And I would note, in fact, the administration did even better. There's a classified document that we can go to the SCIF and read. I've gone to the SCIF and read it. There's no reason for that document to be classified. The only reason that document is classified is because the administration doesn't want me reading the names in this hearing. It is purely a public relations ploy to keep that document classified. Ms. Leaf is defying this committee's authority. Likewise, the second question I asked Ms. Leaf, the State Department issued a written guidance to its employees prohibiting them from using the words Abraham Accords. They're so opposed to the historic peace deals that were signed last year that they've forbidden using Abraham Accords. And I would note, even though there have been some Biden nominees that have had the courage to defy that State Department guidance, it continues to have force. On September 13, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Thomas Greenfield gave an entire speech about the Abraham Accords in which she didn't utter the words Abraham Accords. Instead, she used the banal euphemism normalization agreements. Likewise, on October 13th, Secretary Blinken met with Israeli Foreign Minister Lapid, and the spokesperson read out again just used the words regional normalization efforts. I asked, please provide to the committee and the American people the written guidance prohibiting use of the terms Abraham Accords. And again, Ms. Leaf basically said, go jump in a lake. No, I'm not going to give you your guidance. And by the way, her justification, she said, hey, I'm at the NSC, that's state. I don't have the ability to give anything at state. Well, if Foggy Bottom wants her confirmed as an Assistant Secretary of State, I think they can find the State Department documents. And the third and final point I'll make on Ms. Leaf's QFRs is I asked about the administration's attempt to negotiate a so-called less-for-less agreement with Iran. In other words, lessening pressure on Iran for something substantially less than a promise not to build a nuclear arsenal. Ms. Leaf's answer was to categorically, flat-out deny there are no less-for-less negotiations. They don't exist. Multiple press reports in Reuters and elsewhere flatly contradict that. In my view, Ms. Leaf's answer to this committee was a direct and deliberate falsehood. And so I would say, I addressed this at significant length earlier this week on the floor. I would commend anyone in this committee to listen to that floor address. I think everyone on this committee should care about those questions, particularly the first one. Who are the 16 individuals? I noted on my floor speech that Senate Democrats put in appropriation language in a report a series of names of individuals expressing concerns about their incarceration in Egypt, one of whom is a prominent hate preacher who spreads anti-Semitism at great length. Moments ago, the chairman was speaking about the envoy to oppose anti-Semitism. Well, there is some irony that Senate Democrats are apparently demanding that Egypt release a prominent anti-Semite, and the public doesn't know if those are included in the people for whom the money is being held hostage or not. A final point, Mr. Chairman, I would simply ask that I be recorded as a no and recorded as voting in present for the nominees Leaf, Gawande, Emmanuel, and Reynoso.
Those will be so listed. Let me briefly, I know there are other members who want to speak, but, you know, you can have your opinion, you can't have your own facts, though. The reality is that as it relates to calling business meetings consecutively, the senator has abused the process that this committee has in a way that in my entire life in the Senate I have never seen on either side of the aisle. So when you're going to do it indiscriminately and in a buckshot approach, it then calls for the ability to break an indiscriminate process with an opportunity for members to cast their vote. Now, that, by the way, was done on occasion under Republican majorities. I never heard the senator complain about it. But then again, that majority at that time, that Republican majority, never faced the indiscriminate hold of all nominees. Secondly, on QFRs, you have answers. As a matter of fact, you had at the hearing for Ambassador Leaf, you had a good back and forth, and then there were reports out there that you wanted to follow, and so you decided to follow it. And the names have been provided. They're in the SCIF, classified for anybody who wants to go see them. Evidently, you've referenced that you have seen them. So the names are there. Whether you have a difference of view whether they should or should not be classified is another. But the names have been provided. So to suggest that the names have not been provided, therefore, it is unresponsive. And lastly, you keep saying this thing. I know that if we say it enough, it's like, you know, the history of the past. If we keep saying something that isn't true enough, we hope that it becomes true. The reality is that I have heard the Secretary of State, I have heard Ned Price, the spokesperson for the State Department, and others, including those nominees before this committee, consistently refer to the Abraham Accords as the Abraham Accords. Now, the Secretary of State is the highest person in the federal government as it relates to foreign policy outside of the president. He has consistently named it the Abraham Accords, fitting and appropriately as it is. But to ask a nominee to give you a document that you're looking for, that she has no control over the document, you can ask the Secretary of State for a document. The bottom line is, if there was a prohibition against calling the Abraham Accords, and the Secretary of State wouldn't use it, the Secretary of State spokesperson wouldn't use it, none of the nominees that came before the committee would use it. So it's a fallacious argument at the end of the day. Senator Kane.
Louisiana is recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
You used to be a member of a group called the Young Communist, didn't you?
Senator, are you referring to my membership in the Youth Communist Organization while I was growing up in the Soviet Union?
I don't know. I wanted to ask you that question.
Well, Senator,
There was a group called the Young Communists, and you were a member. Is that right?
I'm not exactly sure which group you're referring to.
Well, the formal name of it is the Leninist Communist Young Union of the Russian Federation, and it's also known as the Leninist Komsomol of the Russian Federation, and it's commonly referred to as the Young Communists. Were you a member?
Senator, I was born and grew up in the Soviet Union.
Yes, ma'am. But were you a member of that organization?
Everybody in that country was a member of the Komsomol, which was the Communist Youth Organization, because
you were a member?
That was a part of normal progress in school.
Have you resigned?
From the youth?
From the Young Communists?
You grow out of it with age, automatically.
Did you send them a letter, though, resigning?
Senator, this was many, many years ago. As far as I remember how the Soviet Union worked, was at certain age, you automatically stop being a member of that
Could you look at your records and see if you can find a copy of your...
Senator Kennedy, I don't interrupt. I almost never interrupt these, but...
Well, you always interrupt me, Mr.
No, actually, I don't. Not
I
nearly as
wanna
many
pursue-
times
I
as I'd
want
like
to
to.
pursue
No,
the line of questions.
she renounced her Soviet citizenship.
Well, I understand that, but you're not the witness. She is. Would you look at your records and see if you can find a letter of resignation for me?
Senator, as I explained, I was part of the Soviet population.
Yes, ma'am. I got that part. I just want to see if you look at your records and see if you find a letter of resignation. Let me tell you what, I've spent a lot of time on your record, and here's what I found. Look, this is America. You can believe what you want, but we can't just let anybody be controller of the currency. You wrote your thesis in college at Moscow State University on, the title was Karl Marx's Economic Analysis and the Theory of Revolution in the Capital. But you won't send Senator Toomey a copy. You studied at Moscow State University, scientific communism, which is the science regarding the working class struggle and the socialist agenda. In 2019, not 30 years ago, in a Canadian documentary, you called the financial services industry, quote, a quintessential asshole industry. You wrote a paper called Systemically Significant Prices, calling for the federal government to set wages, food, gas prices. In 2020, you wrote a paper called The People's Ledger, where you said we need to abolish bank accounts and make everybody set up an account at the Fed where the federal government will have access to your data. In 2020, you wrote another paper called The Climate Case for a National Investment Authority, where you said what we need to do, the oil and gas industry, is have the federal government bankrupt them so we can tackle climate change. In 2019, you joined a Facebook group, a Marxist Facebook group, to discuss socialist and anti-capitalist views. Now, that's what I see from your record, and you have the right to believe every one of these things. You do. This is America. But I don't mean any disrespect. I don't know whether to call you professor or comrade.
Senator, I'm not a communist. I do not subscribe to that ideology. I could not choose where I was born. I do not remember joining any Facebook group that subscribes to that ideology. I would never knowingly join any such group. There is no record of me ever actually participating in any Marxist or communist discussions of any kind. My family suffered under the communist regime. I grew up without knowing half of my family. My grandmother herself escaped death twice under the Stalin regime. This is what's seared in my mind. That's who I am. I remember that history. I came to this country. I'm proud to be an American. And this is why I'm here today, Senator. I'm here today because I'm ready for public service.
Thank you, Professor. I checked with my staff, Senator Kennedy. I've never interrupted you or they believe anybody.
Well, that's not
their questioning.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm entitled to ask my questions.
And you were.
I didn't interrupt you when you gave your introduction, and I don't like being interrupted when I'm asking my questions.
Senator Kennedy, I heard.
It's called senatorial courtesy.
I understand that, and there's also senatorial courtesy.
And you may disagree with me. But that's why you have 5 minutes and I have 5 minutes.
Senator Kennedy, senatorial courtesy is also not doing character assassination. I heard Senator Scott.
Well, that's your opinion.
30 minutes
that's
ago.
Not my opinion.
30 minutes ago, I heard Senator Scott.
But I'm entitled to answer questions without you interrupting me. You and I don't agree. I still like you. We're friends. You have the right to your opinion, but I've got the right to mine. And you can't just interrupt me when I'm asking my question.
You still got a full 5. You still got a full 5 minutes.
And you've done it before.
Senator Scott, just a moment ago, said nobody on his side has done any kind of communist insinuation of her character and her background. He just said that, so I'm hopeful that Senator Scott and maybe perhaps Senator Tillis or Senator Toomey or Senator Kramer will call out those people that do character
Would you not think
Senator,
it's relevant
Senator
that
Warren
she
is
was a member of the Young Communists?
I'm not here to answer your question, Senator Kennedy. Senator Warren is recognized for 5 minutes from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations to each of the nominees. Welcome. Admiral Phillips, I want to follow up on the conversation you and I had yesterday. As you know, I have significant concerns over the Biden administration's ongoing attack on the energy industry and the negative impact it is already having on energy production in the state of Texas. In this case, I'm concerned also about how it could impact the application process for deep water ports licensing. As of November 15th, there are 5 pending applications under review through MARAD's Deep Port Licensing Program. 4 of those 5 are off of the coast of Texas: Blue Marlin, Blue Water, Gulf Link, and Seaport Oil Terminal. Together, these projects create thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in economic benefit. Once operational, these deepwater ports increase our energy export capabilities, establish greater energy security, and support the environment by displacing highly polluting foreign sources of energy. Even though the U.S. energy-related CO2 emissions have declined by 15% since 2007, and they continue to decline, President Biden and his appointees have been deeply hostile to any and all projects involved in the transport of oil or natural gas. I am concerned that the administration's approach will be extended to the deepwater projects that contribute to the state of Texas, to economic and energy security of the nation, and to the national security interest of the nation. Admiral Phillips, if confirmed, you will be in a position at MARAD to approve or to deny applications for port project licenses. Knowing the benefit that these projects bring to the U.S. economy and to our national security, if they meet the statutory requirements, should they be approved?
Senator Cruz, thank you for your question, and thank you for your time yesterday. I appreciate it. As you are aware, and I am not yet in the building, however, MARAD, under the Deepwater Ports Act of 1974, does review through a system jointly co-chaired by MARAD and the Coast Guard, a 9-step process to achieve a record of decision, which then, in theory, would allow a program to move forward, should the conditions of that record of decision be met. The Maritime Administration, as I understand, follows the law in that process and works through that 9-step process to achieve a record of decision, working with stakeholders, with applicants, and with a number of federal agencies. Should I have the honor to be confirmed, I commit to continuing a fair and equitable review of that process under the law to move processes forward to achieve a record of decision.
So you gave me the same answer yesterday in my office, that you would follow the law, and my question is, if these applications meet the legal and statutory requirements, should they be approved?
Senator, thank you for that question. Without being in the building and without having detailed knowledge of each of these applications and their outcomes, I can commit to you that we will review them fairly and equitably, and we will follow the law to complete
So you're
the
not willing to say if they meet the statutory requirements, they should be approved?
Should I have the honor to be confirmed and have actual sight of these applications and the outcomes and records of decision?
Yesterday you said you'd follow the statute. I'm asking if they meet the statutory requirements, should they be approved?
And I am committing to you that we will follow the law and we will review them fairly and equitably to achieve a decision.
Okay, that does not sound like a yes. Do you share the hostility to oil and gas that so many other Biden administration appointees do?
Senator, thank you for that question. I cannot answer the specifics of others.
Do you have a hostility to oil and gas?
The Maritime Administration will review applications.
I'm asking you
fairly.
personally, do you have a hostility to oil and gas projects?
Senator, I look forward to working with your staff in a
Okay,
bipartisan
so you're refusing
way
to answer that? This is a
determine
yes or no
outcomes to this
question. Do you have a hostility to oil and gas projects? This should be a pretty simple question.
Senator, I do not have a hostility to following the law and reviewing the process as defined in the law.
I didn't ask you that. I asked, do you have a hostility to oil and gas projects?
And Senator, I am thanking you for your question, and I am stating that I will follow the law fairly and equitably.
So you're
which means
refusing to
there will
answer
not
that
be a
question. That's
bias
highly
in the outcome.
disappointing that you're not even willing to say you don't have a hostility to those projects. That is deeply concerning.
Senator Cruz, I think she's saying that she's going to follow whatever the administration.
No, she's not. I'm asking if she has a hostility to oil and gas. It would be very easy. If you asked a witness, do you have a hostility to airplane manufacturing, and they refused to answer that, I'd be willing to bet you'd be pretty upset at that.
Look, I think we just made a record investment in port infrastructure, and I believe in
And the Biden administration is signaling out Texas and refusing to invest in Texas.
Well, I think she's saying she's going to get in there and see what the law requires. So
No,
I would
she's not.
Well, I'd like to move to Senator Markey if I could. Thank you.
Thank you,
elders or for
Administrator
their children,
Guzman, the
that's
President
affordable.
of the United States has never worked a day in his life outside of Washington, D.C. You've done more than he has. Come on now. You were a small business owner. If the federal government was providing outside spending that competed directly with your ability to pay people to come to work, do you think it will make it harder for you as a small business owner, which you were, not an administrator now in the administration? Would it make it easier or harder for you to keep people under your employ?
Again, these investments in Build Back Better will strengthen our
And I would,
workforce. And
if you
our-
excuse me,
apologies.
the quorum is important in this committee. And
Madam
the
Chair, I was just
respecting
referring to the
of the
President.
United States is part of that.
Madam Chair, the President of the United States has never worked in our economy. Those are facts. That's not about decorum. That's the truth of the matter. He has
You
never
should
worked a
respect
day
the
in our economy.
institution.
He's always worked in Washington, D.C. To point out that fact and to illustrate the fact that we're talking about major economic policies that do impact the 31 million small business owners in our country is not about decorum. I didn't trash the man.
Your
I'm saying I'm
time
speaking facts.
has expired.
I yield.
And now we recognize the gentle lady from Florida.